Have you ever played a game so much that it becomes impossible to quickly talk about a game and move on?
To many people who have played MMORPGs, this is an actual problem. Many people don't actually get into MMORPGs for a multitude of reasons, really. Sometimes it's because a lot of them are subscription-based. This is ultimately why I stopped playing World of Warcraft. Others, it's a time sucker. This is what I'm experiencing with Black Desert Online right now. Still others might have a legitimate addiction problem or time management problems.
I'm not patronizing. These are actually problems that I've had with MMORPGs in the past. But I play pretty much every type of game, so here we are. Good afternoon, citizens of YouTube. My name is Atratsu, and today we are reviewing Guild Wars 2.
Where to start with this game? First, let's just cover my qualifications on game time alone. This is one of the very few games where I have spent thousands of hours playing. Yes, no life. Well, for what it's worth, many of those hours were racked up because I had nothing else to do, just re-roll another alt or get to world completion back in the day. Here's the thing though. There's a unique problem when you play hundreds upon hundreds of hours of a game. You tend to have too much to say about the game. I mean, I could just give a summary of the game and leave it at that, but at this point, most of you should probably know that I just don't roll that way.
I've gotten better.
Do keep in mind that just because I've spent so much time playing Guild Wars 2, that I definitely do have a bias for liking the game. That being said though, I have now played so much that it's just at the point that I'm like, I'm gonna play something else. So just keep that in mind as you listen to and watch my review. Guild Wars 2 is an MMORPG developed by ArenaNet. After the success of their first MMORPG, Guild Wars 1, in April 28th, 2005, and several expansions later, the ArenaNet team moved on to create Guild Wars 2 and released it August 28th, 2012. I didn't even notice that's 28th on both of those. Somebody at ArenaNet must really like the 28th of the month. Oh, and just a personal Atratsu note here. I started playing Guild Wars 2 November 24th, 2012. Ugh, just saying that makes me feel old. Anyway, this is going to be a 6-part review series. There's just way more that I want to cover about this review, and the whole reason I never started a Guild Wars 2 review was because I felt like the project would be just too demanding. So, I've got the time now, so I'm going to break it up into 6 pieces. The first part should be good enough for most people if you're just looking to get into Guild Wars 2. However, you want to know even more about the inner workings of Guild Wars 2, this could almost be considered a how-to play series, because I'm going to be covering a lot of details. Normally in my reviews, I like to give a sample of the story for the game. In Guild Wars 2, the story is actually slightly customized and selected at character creation. Basically, it starts out with 2 racial-related personal stories, then you join an order, then you fight then you join an army, and then you march to fight an Elder Dragon. I mean, then we're not even talking about Heart of Thorns in this review, because then, like, the story continues on, but I mean, that makes sense. Guild Wars 2 takes place in the land of Tyria. Each race starts in a subsection of Tyria. The Char in Ascalon, the humans in Kryta, the Asuran in the Meguman jungles, the Savari in the Meguman jungles, and last but not least, the mighty Norn in the Shiva Peak Mountains. Each race has a very unique and interesting backstory. The Char and humans have been at war since Guild Wars 1, but only recently has there been peace between the two races, which is actually difficult for some hardcore Guild Wars 1 players to accept, or at least it was at release. Hey, this makes for an interesting psychological study. If you get hindered by something, you start to hate it, and it kind of makes sense to me. but I never had that bias. The Char were, and are, indeed, my favorite race. My main character was going to be a Char, but I kind of have some personal set of rules and principles for what type of character brandishes the name Atratsu. The humans had regrouped in one final bastion of hope after their battles with the Char and the Elder Dragons. Divinity's Reach. Ascalon used to be a human city and settlement, but eventually succumbed to King Stupid, who cast a curse and never let his people lay to rest. So Ascalon is constantly plagued by ghosts. Actually, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but the story is told better in Guild Wars 1. Only by playing Guild Wars 1 and 2 will you understand what's going on. Or, you know, you could just read the wiki page on King Adalburn. Aldenburn? Adalburn? However you want to pronounce his name. Oh, and if dealing with ghosts isn't enough, both the humans of Kryta and the Char need to deal with branded minions of the electric dragon Kakatorek. The Asuran are all subterranean geniuses which have been forced to the surface because of a creature known as the Great Destroyer, a minion of the fire dragon Primordius. Sylvari have their own interesting backstory. It was revealed in the Heart of Thorns expansion they have a strong tie to the jungle dragon Mordramoth, but their tree mother who birthed them all was taught by the pacifistic centaur Ventari. I say that slightly bitterly because I met him in Guild Wars 1 and he was pretty frustrating. Noble, but frustrating. Lastly, the Norn, whom have been pushed around by the ice brood of Jormag. So much, it's pretty much just a way of life for them now. They reside in Holbreck, but truth be told, they're very nomadic and individualistic. So this city life is very odd and different for them. And those are the races, and we've just scratched the surface. I would love to dig deeper into the game's lore, but maybe that's a video for another time. This video is going to be long enough as it is. The point I'm trying to address is that each and everyone in this world has been affected in some way, either directly or indirectly, by beings known as the Elder Dragons. Moving on to gameplay. I figure the best place to first start is at character creation. So to walk you through the basic character creation screen, just wanted to, you know, show that I have all these characters at max level and with world completion. So I mean, you know, if you want to look to the left, I have several characters that I have recently made that I have not gotten 100% world completion, but this is where I racked up most of my time. Anyway, to make a new character, you have to make one of these ones. You can also buy character slot with the gems on the gem store. So then this is what you are faced with. So you are given the different races, the Char, Human, Norn, Asuran, or Sylvari. Let's go with the Char. I was going to be a Char main originally anyway. Then you also have a male and female choice with each one of the races. So it's not locked into one or the other. You can play as a male or a female character of every single race. I only play as male characters though. I don't like being flirted with online. Anyway, not really, just not in general. I don't trust people that I don't know. Then you have the different races, not races, what am I talking about? You have the different classes that you can be. You can be a warrior, you can be a guardian, revenant, ranger, thief, engineer, necromancer, elementalist, mesmer. Each one plays extremely differently, and we will be covering them in more detail soon. Let's just go with my bread and butter. Let's do a ranger. Then you have the different customizations. These are always popular for people to watch. You have the different slider bars, so you can choose how tall you want to be. There isn't much variety that you can have here. You do have the way to hide armor. You can change the lighting. You can zoom in, and you can zoom out. You have different choices of physical appearance. Again, this is the same regardless of the race. You can have like a scrawny looking human, or you can look really buff football. This is about the biggest roly-poly-ish looking one that you can have. Then you can choose some of the customizations, and before I played any other games, this was some of the most detailed customization that I had ever been allowed to do. It's pretty cool. I am a fan. I do like it. So then you have like different patches of fur that you can have, and this is one of the parts that you might want to hide armor for. So you can see for yourself if you want tiger stripes, if you want leopard spots. cheetah, I don't know what that is. Freckles, I don't know. Then you can go through several different preset colors that you want. So you could choose to be black with white spots, or you could be white with black spots. Ooh. Actually, there are several different fur colors that you can do, that you can make some really interesting combinations. As always, though, it's very easy to make characters that look just completely atrocious. So do keep that in mind. Then you have the different head options. So there are different hairstyles. You can, as you can see, click and drag around. Mine's a little bit fast, so you can go. That would be like if you had a bald Char, but they never really seem like that. Ooh, let's go with the tiki one. I do like those. Then you can also like change the accessories, so we can give them green highlights. And then you can choose the type of hair. So let's go for an Atratu standard white hair color. Or it used to be Atratu standard. You can adjust the face. This is where it starts to get a little bit tricky because a lot of people only choose certain types of faces. Later on in the game, you can buy packs that will modify your face, but they cost gems. So you have to pay gems to be able to get some of the custom faces. You can only get certain faces from buying a customization pack from the gem store. So I'm going to stick with, again, one of the faces that I'm very familiar with. They are slightly customizable, so that's cool. You can choose the different types of horns. Again, you have like different accessories, and for humans and stuff like that, you can choose whatever you want. You can choose the length. You can make them longer or shorter. Face detail, you can adjust the eye angle. This, again, is stuff that's going to take you some time to figure out what you want to do with your character and how you want them to appear. As with learning any kind of program, I recommend that you just pull on the sliders as far to the right and far to the left until you figure out exactly what you want to do. So we're going to... I've never actually made a character that their eyes are completely hidden, so this is kind of funny to me. I'm very amused. I amuse easily. Pulling there. Size of the teeth. That's what I did with my other characters, though, so we'll make them smaller. Tilt the jaw. Let's tilt the jaw in. Muzzle. Like that. Yeah. He's going to have trouble eating stuff there. And then you can adjust how big his head is. Ear length. Let's just put that in there. Armor die. This is some of the best customization that you get to do. And you can do this at any point. You can customize the way that your gear appears. You can make yourself look. Let's see here. Is there pink? Let's make us look like a watermelon. It's about the best that I think I'm going to be able to do. So then this is for the pants. Let's just go straight up green for those. And then the shoes. On Char, the shoes are not so noticeable. They're more noticeable on other characters, humans and such. After you have customized your character to the like, Ranger characters anyway get to choose what they want to start with. For other characters like warriors, revenants, guardians, you can choose the type of helm that you're going to start with. So we're going to start with, let's go Devourer, because these are, let's be honest, I used to think that it was the drakes, but these are basically just fancy lizards. I like Devourers. Then you can choose the way that you interact with the world. This used to be, you know, it used to have an impact on the game, because you used to be able to choose different options, but I really don't see it really making a difference anymore. I always personally chose dignity, not because of nobility crown thing, but because I was just like, you know what? Yeah, that's the noble answer. That's what I would do. And then the Char. This is when you start to get into a little bit of the story customization. So depending on the choices that you make from this point and the next one, you will adjust your personal story as you progress through Guild Wars 2. So you can be in the Blood Legion, the Ash Legion, or the Iron Legion. If you're curious, the Blood Legion, that was basically the standard soldiers, I believe. The people that get into combat, fight hand-to-hand. Ash Legion, there are the stealth force, basically. And the Iron Legion, they're the engineers. So, you know, I would always fancy myself being a part of the Ash Legion. And then you can choose your mentor. I don't remember if this makes any difference, who your mentor was. No, this doesn't make a difference. This is whoever runs around with you. And everybody likes Maverick. This is going to affect the story. So it does that for each character. So you have the loyal soldiers. So this is going to adjust what it was. I think with an honor as Gladium, you actually get to meet your father. Then Sorceress Shaman. There's a bunch of story about the Char, and we'd have to get into detail. Then you choose your name, as you can see in the corner. There are some rules that you can choose. So I'm not going to do that. People are going to think that I was hacked. Review this game. Can we do that? We can do that.
I am a Char.
Then you have this cool little artistic intro thing that will play, explaining the race, giving you a little bit of background, with the absolutely beautiful, beautiful, beautiful Guild Wars 2 art style that they do. I absolutely adore the way that they do this. A quick note before we jump into the user interface. I've customized my minimap to appear at the top right of my screen. This is not the original placement for my minimap. It was originally at the bottom right. The only customizable elements, well, that you can adjust and move on the screen are the minimap and the chat box. Now then, first you have the 1 through 5 keys. These are all based on the weapon that you are using. Different weapons, different attacks. There are two-handed weapons, there are one-handed weapons, there's one-handed off weapon, one-handed main weapons. Weapons, in each weapon there's a weapon switch, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Weapons for days. Next, you have the 6 through 0 key. These are called utility skills. Your 0 key is also known as an elite skill. Each race has a few special radical-related utilities and elite skills, but all class or profession utilities are shared regardless of race choice. So do keep that in mind. So at this point, you might be asking,
Hey Atratsu, this is all nice and stuff, but what does this mean for me?
it means shut up. The race-related skills are crap at the end game anyway, because your character can be built only to improve class-related utilities. I know a lot of people who love to summon Balthazar's Hounds as their human elite skill, but I say to crap with that noise, I'd rather use Entangle, which I have spec'd to decrease the cooltime only slightly. Using Entangled every 48 seconds is way better than using old Bow's Boys Dogs every 240 seconds, with no real way to decrease that cooldown. Also, real talk, I really liked Reaper of Grenth's elite ability, which chills and poisons nearby foes. The elite skill just never aligned with how I was playing my character. I play my main ranger from a distance. Later I fixed this problem by making several different necromancers which have a very cool shadow effect of their own without needing a blessing from Grenth. But I digress a lot. To the top right of my screen you have the minimap. You can click and drag in the corner to resize it. You can also hover your mouse over and mouse wheel in and out to zoom. There are also a few buttons to the side, but I never really use those. I like my map to stay static, but choose whatever floats your boat. And if you ever need the world map, just hit M. Don't mess around with any of those buttons. It's just easier. M for map. To the top left, you have your various menu buttons. The gear is game menu, contacts or LFG, hero, inventory, mail, black line, trading post, world vs. world, and PvP from the left to the right. We'll cover all those in another video. To the bottom left, you have a chat box. You can set up your custom chat boxes like I have to filter out undesired conversations. I'll spare you the paint drawing details of how to do that though. At the absolute bottom, you have your experience bar, which will obviously represent at which point you will ascend to the next decimal representation skill set. Can you tell sometimes I get tired of using normal words? It'll show you when you ding. In the middle bottom of your screen, you have your health. And above it, you'll see two tiny bars wrapping around it representing dodge roll stamina. Above the utilities skills are the buffs. Whew, can you see why making an unscripted first impression video is so much easier than doing an Atratsu review episode? Okay, so now we've explained the basics for how to get started and walk you through the basics of character creation. Let's dive a little bit deeper, shall we? Just a small note here. I think it's worth noting that when you make a new character in the game, there are some restrictions. You don't unlock everything that you're going to be seeing in this review immediately. At first, you're going to just start out with some of the basic skills, and then you'll unlock utility skills, and then I think about around level 30, you'll be able to unlock and spend points on your elite skill. But this is just gone in such a blink of an eye after you play the game for a while that I really don't have anything else that I can really say or want to focus on it too much. But I figured I should add into this review that it is important to note that you will not have all of these abilities unlocked immediately in the game, but a majority of your time playing Guild Wars 2, these skills and abilities will be unlocked. So the basic controls are quite simple. In Wasid we trust. And then if you double tap in a direction, your character will dodge roll. Being an avid customization king, I rebound the dodge key to something that I liked. Also, I disabled the double tap feature, because when you do jumping puzzles, and you double tap on one area when you're trying to get to a specific spot, you will dodge roll and die off of cliffs. So yeah, I would recommend disabling that and just dodge rolling with a key instead of double tapping. Trust me, you'll be thanking me later. Now then, dodging itself is extremely simple to understand, but a little bit more complicated to master. But knowing when and where to dodge is where the mastery part comes into play. This is more relevant in endgame, be it PvP, World vs. World, or Dungeons and Fractals. Or, you know, just hanging out in the world like me. For now, let's just say that you can dodge through almost anything. The last topic on this video is the different classes in Guild Wars 2. These used to be a whole lot easier to explain before Heart of Thorns and Elite Specialization, but let's just pretend I didn't say anything about Elite Specialization. Besides, we don't even need to talk about that yet. Or until I talk about Heart of Thorns. Review coming soon? At this time, Guild Wars 2 has 9 classes. Or if you want to sound like you play Guild Wars 2, they're actually called professions. And professions are called crafting. Don't think about it, I'm probably going to alternate between calling them classes and professions anyway throughout this review series. Sorry, but I'm too messed up to consistently remember to use one of these over another. Just know, in Guild Wars 2, they all refer to themselves as professions, and then they refer to crafting as crafting. Yeah, it gets complicated. You get used to it after you play several thousand hours, though. But back on topic, there are 9 classes: the Warrior, Guardian, Revenant, Ranger, Thief, Engineer, Necromancer, Elementalist, and Mesmer. Let's organize them into the armor types. There are 3 types of armor: heavy, medium, and light. Heavy armor is your obligatory plate body styled armor. Don't worry, you're not completely locked into looking like you've got plate armor. There are the standard MMORPG tropes. Fan gear, which seems every female character has. Medium armor is your leather armor, but leather or chainmail styled armor. Light armor is my least favorite because I have the most trouble trying to find light armor that I actually like the appearance of. That being said, let's quickly mention the wardrobe feature. You're locked into the armor type that you equip. So if you're equipping plate armor, you gotta have a plate armor, other type of plate armor that you can make it look like. After you've played the game a while, you will gain a huge collection of different types of weapons and armor which you can change at will with the price of 1 transmutation charge. If you really want to hear some theory crafting or Style Wars 2 advice, I could make a separate video on that. For now, let's just say that you have a whole lot of control over stylizing your character to become your very own snowflake. It's actually very uncommon to find 2 people who look identical. You customize the armor, you also customize armor dyes, but you also have to unlock armor dyes as well. But yes, classes. We're talking about classes. The heavy classes are Warrior, Guardian, and Revenant. The medium classes are Ranger, Thief, and Engineer. The light classes are Necromancer, Elementalist, and Mesmer. Once again, I'm going to spare you the sluggish, detailed explanation about classes, weapons, and builds. For the sake of simplicity, I'm only going to mention a few of the key weapons you should consider when making or playing a class. However, I'm not going to spare you from the details of what kind of weapons that you have in Guild Wars 2. In Guild Wars 2, there are axes, daggers, maces, pistols, swords, scepters, focus, shield, torch, war horns. There are war hammers as well. Great swords, hammers, longbows, rifles, short bows, staffs. There are also underwater weapons, being the harpoon gun, spear, and trident. There are also several standard types of builds which come into the utility section. Minion builds, which lets you have a bunch of minions. Signet builds, which gives you passive buffs, and then you click a signet, and then that gives you a temporary boost. And shout builds, which tend to be noisy. Sometimes there are class exclusive builds like for survival skills on a ranger, or well builds for a necromancer. Each class has a number of different build choices for talents, utilities, weapons, etc. We'll talk more about how these builds work in the next video though. I'm sorry, is this getting to be a bit much? As a quick summary, I'm just saying, later on, when you get used to the character, you'll explore and branch into learning new tricks, builds, and skills. Now then, let's start at the top, and we will go through each and every class in Guild Wars 2. First off, Warriors. Warriors are your staple class. In Guild Wars 2, they can be effective ranged glass cannons or tanks. They can just be standard DPS. They also have buffs that they can use to heal their entire team. The typical weapon you see them using are great swords, swords and shields, longbows. I know some warriors who swear by using rifles and hammers. My suggestion is to try out each weapon for yourself. Guardians are like warriors with magic. They're extremely similar and yet have completely different feel. They have a completely different set of skills, talents, and feel very different to play. Guardians are probably one of the most sought after classes to play in dungeons. Or at least when I ask somebody what class they want me to play, and I mentioned that I have my Shout Bunker Guardian, they're always just like, yeah. I also mentioned that I am a Ranger main, and they're just like, yeah, no, we want your Shout Bunker Guardian. I'm just like, ah. It's sad, really. Even though I'm a Ranger main, no one cares. Biased, I swear. Bah! Next, we have the Revenant. The Revenant is the latest class added to the club. They're also more complicated to play as. They too have similar weapon choices to that of Warriors and Guardians. However, they have far more, shall we say, mystic abilities? As a Revenant, your powers are boosted by an additional resource. You can switch between channeling two different legendary figures in Guild Wars lore. This is basically fan service to Guild Wars 1 gamers. Now that resource power sits at 50%, and weapon skills and utilities will slow down how fast you regenerate this meter, or decrease it altogether. Also, when you're in combat, the power will go all the way up to 100%. So you have two sets of utilities and skills with each weapon. Yeah, I don't think I'm explaining this class very well. It's a flow character which takes some time to explain and to learn. If you want more, I would definitely need to cover this class in its own video. Next, the Ranger class. The Ranger class is my bread and butter. I first played as a Ranger after coming out of World of Warcraft Mists of Pandaria. There are two types of bow you can use as a Ranger, long and short bow. A mistake I made very early in my Guild Wars 2 experience was equipping both of those bows to my Ranger. The problem is the longbow is best suited for attack, just straight up damage builds, whereas the short bow is best suited for condition builds. Condition builds are basically damage over time, or dot builds, where you put degeneration skills on enemies like bleeds, poisons, freezes, vulnerability, etc. Next, you have the Thief class. The Thief will normally use one of 4 different types of weapons: swords, daggers, short bow, or pistol. Pretty common to see a mix or all of those weapons. Thieves are very similar to rogues in other games, but stealth is very different in Guild Wars 2. Some would also argue it's kind of overpowered. The way they balance it though, they'll hold that thought, I'll talk about it. If you stealth, you cannot be seen by anyone while that buff is active. But the stealth is a timed buff, so once that buff wears off, you're visible again. The trick to playing a thief definitely comes down to builds and gear. But some thieves know how to stack the stealth buff or time their stealth perfectly so they can enter stealth immediately after the buff wears off to remain invisible. The thieves also have a unique resource known as initiative, which almost all weapon skills require. This is what ensures thieves cannot remain perpetually in stealth. Well, initiative and cooldowns. That's why most dedicated thieves, trolls, will get good enough to pull some of the more tricky thief tricks, like stacking your stealth so that you have a longer stealth period, or getting back into stealth immediately when the buff wears off. That being said, most thieves are glass cannons. If you can predict where they are, even if they're invisible, if you can think like a thief, you can damage them while they're still in stealth. Some of the most satisfying kills I've ever had have been on thieves who I've killed during stealth. Also, do note that some classes are better at killing thieves than others. I tend to think of necromancers and well necromancers. If you set all your wells down right where a thief is supposedly going to be, it's just GG. They're going to have a tough time if they can't take you down fast enough. Next, the engineer. The engineer is a whole lot different than many of the other classes. The weapon choices aren't nearly as important as your utility choices. For simplicity, I'll talk about 2 weapon kits that I use as an engineer. I use the bomb kit or the grenade kit. I do not use both of them at the same time. They both do pretty heavy condition damage, only one is suited for melee range while the other is suited for just range attacks in general. I would definitely not recommend the engineer to people who are new to Guild Wars 2 because they take quite a while getting used to and definitely have a learning curve to them. But learning them is definitely worthwhile. They're very fun and very different to play as. Next, the Necromancer. Now we come to one of my favorites. That is what I would like to say if I loved one class more than any of the other ones. I swear each class plays differently and each is enjoyable in its own unique way. It's pretty crazy to say that considering how many hours I've played of this game. Every character feels different. Every single one. A warrior with a bow feels nothing like a ranger with a bow. Necromancers are like warlocks in other games. They can summon dead bone creatures instead of demons, or they can summon wells. You can build them so they do condition damage, or you can build them so they just do straight up base damage. Next you have Elementalists. Elementalists are the mages of Guild Wars 2. However, unlike in most games where you are locked into one type of magic, Elementalists can switch between 4 different types of magic. This makes them extremely fast in gameplay. But since they can switch between 4 different elements, giving their weapon 5 different elemental skills, they're locked into only one weapon at a time. So no weapon swapping for you. That would be crazy. You would have 20 different skills. You just keep on switching weapons and switching elements. It'd be way too much. No one can keep up with that. Well, I shouldn't say that. There are people that could keep up with that, but it would be a whole mess and it would not be friendly for new people for the class. Again, Elementalists are a bit complicated going into it, but definitely not as complicated as an Engineer or Revenant, so you might want to consider this one, or you might want to stick to one of the more basic bread and butter characters. Lastly, and most notoriously, the Mesmer. The Mesmer is one of the most popular PvP and World vs. World characters. It used to be the class that I was worst at playing too, but a friend explained some tips on how to play. Basically, there are a few different builds: Mesmers who keep their clones alive, and Shatter builds. When leveling up a Mesmer, Shatter builds were the easiest to use. I don't know if this is still the case anymore, but pro tip, use a great sword. By the time that I leveled up my Mesmer, I had gotten world exploration on all these different characters, and I was working on getting different weapon skills and weapon kills. So the Mesmer I played as, I was using different weapons. So I was rocking a pistol, focus, and wand. And who knows what other nonsense I was trying to do. Basically, I was trying to use anything that wasn't a longbow, greatsword, or regular sword, because those were the 3 that I had already gotten the achievements for. Anyway, the Mesmer has stealth abilities, condition damage, straight up damage, and lastly, the signature ability is the cloning abilities that they have. Mesmers create doppelgangers to confuse and attack their opponents, both in-game and in real life. That being said, the Mesmers aren't the only class that use the debuff Confusion, but they're definitely the typical culprits. The Confusion debuff will damage you whenever you attack, even if you're not hitting anything. So clean that debuff off or just wait until it goes away. Do not try to attack while you are confused. Whew, times 2. Do you see why I need to break this review up into smaller parts? We've only covered the story, the basics, the controls, and the classes, and touched on other elements that will be addressed in other videos to come. So that's it for part 1 of my Guild Wars 2 review. This will probably be more than enough for most people looking to get into Guild Wars 2, or looking if they're trying to decide if they want to buy it or not. If you want to know more, stay tuned for my next part video where we talk about gear, stats, traits, and skills. And if you want another sample of even more videos farther down the line, we haven't even touched anything about endgame content, PvP, world vs. world, stats, achievements, crafting, dungeons, holidays, and much, much more. There's a lot of content to cover. So stay tuned if you want to know more about Guild Wars 2. This is enough for you. Thank you for watching. My name is Atratsu, and as always, I approve this review.
Quite a reward.